Hi everybody, welcome back to session 3 of AS Business, and we are going to be starting with, again, continuing with Unit 1, and we're going to be looking at finishing off markets and looking at price elasticity of demand. Okay, so just have a little bit on PED and then going on to some other topics. So, price elasticity of demand, also known as PED, so that it might come up as PED in your exam, measures how responsive demand is to change in price. Now, there is an inverse relationship between price and demand. As price goes up, demand goes down, and as price goes down, demand goes up. Now, the question is by how much, and is the change in demand more than proportional to the change in price or less than proportional? And that's what businesses need to consider. So as an example, if you increase prices by 10% and demand falls by 5%, then the PED is inelastic as the demand is less than the increase in price. Now, if prices increase by 10% and demand falls by 13%, however, the PED is price elastic. So as the fall in demand is greater than the rise in price. Now, price elastic demand means that a change in the price will lead to more than proportional change in demand. So this means the demand is sensitive to price rises. A price inelastic demand means that change in price will lead to less than proportional change in demand, and then this is not so sensitive to changes in price. So in order to kind of give you a little bit more examples of this, we're going to watch a little bit of a video to kind of give you some real life situations with regards to price elasticity of demand. calculate a percentage change. So first we work out the difference between your two values, then divide the number by the original's value. Then you're going to multiply by 100. Then, for example, if the rise from 1,000 units to 12,000 units, you take 200 divided by 1,000, which gives you 0.2. Times that by 100, that gives you a 20% increase. So looking at price elasticity of demand and PED, how to use this in a real life sort of situation. If a news agent sells 200 cans of Coke a week at a price of 50p, the news agent raises the price of Coca-Cola from 60p and demand falls by 180 cans. What is the PED for this product? So first of all, you're going to need to work out step 1, which is the difference. So that's the change in demand divided by the original demand times 100, which gives you 10% minus 10%. Change in price divided by the original price times by 100 gives you 20%. And then you take the change in quantity demand, divide that by a percentage change in price demand, and that gives you a PED of minus 0.5. So the answer is minus 0.5 as a 20% change in price has led to less than proportional change in demand of just 10%. The cans are therefore said to be price inelastic with regards to this particular scenario. So in business, it is assumed that the PED will always be a negative number. Okay, so price and demand will always move in the opposite direction. And if a PED is between 0 and minus 1, for example, minus 0.7, then the price is inelastic. And if it's more than 1, so for example, minus 1.4, then demand is price elastic. Factors influencing PED. So there are a number of factors that affect this. So it might be the availability of substitutes. The closer the substitutes and the more that are available, the higher the price elasticity of demand. It could be the price of competitor goods. So if the price of goods in competition with a product increase, this will affect demand and price elasticity of demand. And time. So the longer the time period, the higher the price elasticity of demand, giving more time for other firms to have ability to produce similar products, and customers have more chance of adapting their buying habits as well. You've also got branding. So branding firms spend money and time building their brand image, and by creating that brand loyalty, it is known that customers are willing to pay more for that product, and that's going to raise prices as the PED is lower. It could be income. If consumer income are higher, then the issue of price becomes less important because people aren't watching what they're spending as much. And the nature of the good. So if it's a luxury good, for example, the price elastic as demand will be more sensitive to change in price, and necessity good will be price inelastic as demand will be less sensitive to change in price. So the significance of PED in terms of implications on price. Well, business people want to know how to change in price will impact on revenue, and this will help determine whether a change in price is a good or bad decision for the business. So if I just go back there, so raising selling price, sales revenue will decrease, as we know, and sales revenue will increase with inelastic products, and lowering price with an elastic demand product, sales revenue will increase, and inelastic demand sales revenue will decrease. So looking at rearranging the formula, you can look at doing that. So the percentage change in demand, just multiply the percentage change in price by the elasticity of demand. So you can rearrange it like that as well. And then looking at significance of PED. So if product price is inelastic, then a firm knows that if it raises its price, even though demand will fall, total revenue will increase. Okay, so significance of PED in terms of implications on price. So it can also be shown mathematically, as we've seen. We've looked at that example before, and we've sort of looked at what should happen to the revenue. But what should happen to the revenue as a result of rising in prices is that revenue was 200 cans times that by 50 was 100, and revenue is now 180 cans times that by 60 is 108. So they're actually making more money even though demand has dropped. They're making £8 more than they were previously when they were selling at 50p. So as a business decision, even though cans the demand has gone down slightly, you are still making more money. So that was a good business decision. Problems with casting price elasticity of demand, though. The price elasticity of demand for a product is constantly changing in a dynamic world. So what might be a good decision, 6 months ago may not be a good decision now. Very difficult for firms to measure because difficulty in finding accurate information. Price elasticities change over different price ranges. Price elasticity will change over the period of economic cycle. It will be affected, for example, by a recession. Tastes and fashions are constantly changing. Competitors don't stand still, and they are continually improving existing products, bringing out new products and trying to promote products as well. So it is quite hard to always say yes, this is a good decision. You need to be looking at that quite regularly to make sure that that is still, if you're reducing prices or rising prices, whether it's still a good decision. Income elasticity of demand, and this is called YED, is a measure of responsiveness of demand to change in the income, and the relationship between the price and demand was straightforward. They always move in the opposite direction. And it is true the relationship between income and demand. If your income went up, what products would you demand more of, and what would you demand less of anything? Income elasticity of demand can be a negative or a positive, and income and demand can move in the same direction or opposite directions. Now, when a demand for a product increases, when income increases, we call this a normal good. Normal goods will always have a positive income elasticity of demand with a plus sign. And when demand for a product decreases, when income decreases, this is called an inferior good. Now, an inferior good will always have a negative income elasticity of demand with a minus sign. So calculate that. You've got your percentage change, quantity demand, divided by percentage change in income, and that gives you your YED. Example, income increases by 50%. This leads to an increase in demand for iPads of 20%. The income elasticity demand is plus 1.33. So looking at glorious luxury holiday site in Yorkshire Moors, the average UK income increases by 5%. The demand in glorious increases from 2,000 nights occupancy to 3,500 nights occupancy. Sorry, couldn't say that word. What is the YED? So why don't you have a little go at trying to find that out yourself? Factors that income elasticity demand is determined by. So you've got whether a good is a necessity, so you need it to be able to live, or a luxury. So at a higher standard of living, increased consumers see additional demand tend towards luxury goods as demand for necessities is stated. So if you think about, you were needing food, drink, general household goods as a necessity. Your luxury might be your nice holidays, maybe having fancier branded, cereal, whatever that might be. The level of income of a consumer, poorer consumers tend to spend their income on necessities because that's what they need to actually live. And as they become wealthier, the YED for necessities move towards zero as consumers are satisfied with the amount of the product, staple foods that they can buy. Normal goods that are necessities will have a lower positive YED. And then as a consumer increases, they're likely to spend more on luxuries, and these like products like cars, holidays are going to have a higher positive YED. Now, what's that relevant to business? So standards of living, wealthier countries are likely to consume with high disposable incomes, and this is going to mean you've got greater spending power, and you're going to likely be wanting more luxury goods and services, and firms will produce superior products that meet the needs of consumers, so like high technology goods, As global standards of living increase, we would expect to see an increase in demand for luxury goods and movement away from inferior goods. Now, firms will identify the state of the economy, e.g. a recession, and produce goods and services to meet the demand of consumers. For example, pound shops, for example, selling necessities, and the inferior goods are likely to expand in these particular market conditions. So we're going to have a little look at market research now for Unit 1. So what is market research? Well, that's your collection and analysis of data and information to inform business about the market that they are in and the customers' wants and needs as well. So data collected and analysed is used to a range of different things. So identify and anticipate what the customer wants and the customer needs are, to quantify the likelihood of demand, so whether your product or service is going to be popular. There's no point ploughing money into obviously a product or service that just isn't going to sell. So it's going to be really important that you find out whether there is actually a demand for your product or your service. Plan resources to match anticipated demand and make sure that you have the infrastructure in to be able to meet that. Gain insight into consumer behaviour, spot trends in the market and inform the marketing mix. Different ways of doing market research. So one of the ways is primary market research. Now this is also named as field research, and it makes you collect data firsthand that doesn't exist already. So examples of primary market research are things like surveys and questionnaires, postal, home, telephone conversations, face-to-face, online, maybe surveys or chats, in-depth interviews, focus groups and observations, and observing how customers go round shops and what they buy and how they buy things. Secondary market research is your desk research, and that's already been undertaken by another organisation and it already exists. So examples of secondary market research are things like government reports, national statistics, market research organisations that have already carried out market research on certain products or services, professional bodies, trade unions, international bodies, academic organisations that may have done research, newspapers and magazines, and also looking at the internet as well. So if you look at two different types of data, you've got qualitative and you've got quantitative data. Okay, so importantly, you know the difference between the two. So your qualitative research is gathering non-statistical information that gives a company in-depth insight into the reasoning for human behaviour. So it's something that you can't put into charts and graphs, you can't put into a percentage. It is about getting in-depth kind of insights about what people think and feel about your product or your service. Now, things like interviews, focus groups are very good sources of qualitative information. You've got quantitative research, and this is gathering statistical data to inform the company about people's behaviour, but does not identify the reasons. So this is where you can quantify it in a chart or graph or percentage. You can say 80% of people think this, 80% of people say this. It's good to show it statistically, but it's not very good for you to get in-depth information and research about your product or your service. It is good for an overview, but you kind of would want to have both things in order to make this market research something that's quantifiable. So selecting the most appropriate method of research will depend on a number of things: budget, time constraints, internal expertise, purpose of the research, and importance of confidence levels. Now, primary research is very time consuming. It's something that costs money. It does cost a lot and it takes a lot of time to put it together. However, it does really kind of meet your specific needs of your business because it's been designed yourself. You can find out information exactly what you're wanting. You can tailor it to your actual business. Now, especially with regards to primary research, is that you need to be looking at the value of sampling. So you can't ask the opinions for all your customers and all of your people that are potentially going to buy your products. So it's important that you have a good representative sample of your customer base. So sample is a group of subjects that have chosen from a large group population for investigation, and the value of sampling will depend on sampling technique used, how the sampling was carried out, and the size of the sample. Now, the size of the sample will depend on the number of factors, including the budget available, the importance of accuracy, and the degree of confidence in the results. Types of sampling techniques that you've got random, so a sample is selected for a study from a population where each individual is chosen entirely by chance and there's an equal chance of being selected. Or you could do it by quota. Now, the population is first segmented into subgroups before a judgment is made in selection of respondents that are representative of that subgroup. So within a subgroup of women, 60% may be 20 to 40, 20% might be 41 to 60, and 20% might be 61 plus. The sample should represent this. So it's not everybody would have the same chance of being obviously chosen all the time. Limitations of market research, though, is that you've got past data and trends may not be fair indication of the future. As we know, businesses are dynamic. Things change quite quickly, especially in things like the fashion and the technology world. So it's making sure that obviously you're keeping up to date with your market research, and that can be quite time consuming and quite expensive. Accuracy of your research findings, dependent upon ability to correctly analyse your findings. You've got financial and opportunity costs, and then you've got also bias, so questionnaire bias, sampling bias, respondent bias, the fact that maybe they're not telling the complete truth and when we're talking to you about your product or your service. Now going to look at business structure for Unit 1. Okay, so what is business structure? So you've got different forms of businesses, and these include sole traders, private limited companies and public limited companies. You've got partners in there as well, which is not on this list, partnerships, private sector and public sector organisations, and you've got non-profit organisations such as charities and social enterprises also. So private sector and public sector. Your private sector of the economy is owned and controlled by individuals or groups of individuals rather than the government. So these are things like sole traders, private limited companies, public limited companies, it's your partnerships, things like that. Your public sector is a sector of the economy that is owned and controlled by the government rather than the individuals or the groups of individuals. So like state education, NHS, other services like the police, army, navy, air force, anything to do with the military, anything, county councils, anything that you obviously are working the public sector. The aims of the private sector businesses generally tend to include profit. That is quite often the main reason businesses will exist, is that they want to make a profit. And they sometimes want to make quite a big profit. To achieve your sales revenue and higher than total costs, and your profit is your sales revenue, take away your costs. It could be that you want to grow, okay? You want to increase in size, either by value of sales or volume of sales or both. And this may be organically, for example, new stores, launching new products, or by joining with other businesses and taking them over. Also survival, this is a big one for certainly new businesses that may be in the first few years, or businesses that are coming into problems, but basically to continue to exist. They want to be able to exist, and that sometimes a primary objective for startup businesses is making sure they are surviving and getting through the first few years and making profit, or starting to make profit. Now, the aims of the public sector are different because they are to provide services to society, and that's what they're there for. They're not there to make profit, they're to make essential services available for the good of society as a whole, so like your education, your healthcare, your military. Services that will not be provided by the private sector, so like your policing and defence of the country. Services that cannot easily be charged for or sold profitably, but benefit everyone, like your street lights or your roads. We look at sort of sole trader, say from a private sector, is an individual who owns and runs their own business. Now, they are registered as self-employed with the HMRC, and they are legally required to keep a record of their income and expenses at the end of each tax year to fill in the self-assessment tax return for HMRC. Now, the profits made by the sole trader are classed as income, and therefore this is taxable through income tax. Now, as a sole trader, you have unlimited liability. So this means that they are personally responsible for all debts run by the business. Therefore, their home or assets might be used to pay off any debts that they might incur and are unable to pay. So it's really important that you know as a sole trader that if, for example, you were being sued because something happened to a customer or a client, and they have decided to kind of take action against you, that you are the one that's liable for that, and it's potentially, you know, your home or any assets that you personally own could be affected by that. Sole traders as well, and when they die, the business dies with them. It's not passed on to anybody, so that is obviously something that is important to realise as a sole trader. But they're very easy to set up as a business. So the benefits, cheap and easy to set up, as I just said. All your profits go to the sole trader. You've got autonomy over your decisions, that you can make all your decisions yourself. You can decide when you work, where you work, what holidays you take. Financial records remain private, and the motivation is high. The success of the individual and business are one and the same. Your disadvantages, though, is that you do have unlimited liability, so you are liable for any of the debts that the business might have. You've got limited capital for investment. You've got limited, maybe specialist skills, as the owner is the jack of all trades, maybe, or you'll have to buy in a specialist. It's difficult to find cover when you're ill, although sole traders often do employ people. So it's not to say that you can't employ people as a sole trader. You would be the owner of the business and you might employ people. But you are the owner, you're the one that's responsible. You've got partnerships, and partnership is where two or more people share the costs, risks and responsibilities of being a business together. Now, with a sole trader, each partner has to register as self-employed with the HMRC, and again will have unlimited liability for their business. Now, each partner is equally responsible for the debts incurred and will take a share of the profits made by the business. They have a share in the decisions making, and they normally contribute to the management of the business, but can delegate responsibility also. You've also got things like sleeping partners, which partners might invest in, but they don't manage the business, and they kind of will just step back and let somebody else do all the day-to-day running of the business. They'll just get a particular percentage share of the profit. And as I said, traditionally partnerships will have unlimited liability. Now, it's really important, again, this isn't legally that you need to have this, but that you have a deed of partnership. Now, a deed of partnership is something that is legally set up to show what would happen if the business was to, people wanted to move on from the business, or they wanted to kind of go elsewhere, or if, you know, what profits are going to be shared. It's kind of things like that. Okay, partnerships, the benefits of partnership is risks and costs and responsibilities are shared. So you've got more scope for specialist skills, simple and flexible. You've got financial records remain private, and you've got more capital can be raised more than a sole trader because you've got more people invested in the business. You also might have more luck getting an actual bank loan because there's more people that are responsible for this. Disadvantages, though, is that you've got unlimited liability, so arguments can occur. If a partner dies, resigns or goes bankrupt, the partnership is dissolved, and trust becomes a significant element between partners. A written agreement should be drawn up, So I was talking about a deed of partnership would be a good idea to make sure that the rules of the partnership is set out in a legal documentation. Again, that isn't a legal requirement. You don't have to have that, but it's always advisable. We've got limited companies. Now, limited companies exist in their own right. So a company has its own legal identity. So they can own assets, they can own buildings, they can own money as well. So the company's finances are separate to the person who owns or is a shareholder in the business. So they're two different things. Shareholders are the owners of the limited companies, and they have limited liability and not responsible for the company's debts. So they can only lose money that they have invested in the business in the form of shares. Okay, so limited companies must register at the company house, and companies must send the registrar of companies the following. So they need to a memorandum of association with your name, registered office, and what the company will do. Articles of association, the rules for running the company. Form 10, which details the directors and company secretary. Form 12, declaring that they comply with the company law. And companies must deliver company house each year true and fair set of accounts along with an annual return. Private limited companies have an LTD after the name. So if you see a company name with those initials, that means that they are a private limited company. They are owned by shareholders who are known to the company, often family and friends, and can only sell shares on to other shareholders, i.e. they cannot sell them openly on the stock exchange. So this means that shares are often sold at discount to the real value of shares because the shareholders are locked in and either sell at the price that they are offered or do not sell at all. Now, public limited company have a PLC after the name. So with this, shares can be sold to the public via the stock exchange. Now, open to more public scrutiny, the risk of hostile takeovers. So if anyone obtains like 51% shares of the company, that they have they are the major shareholder. Advantages of a private limited company is you've got limited liability. You've got that separate legal identity, so that you're more flexible than a PLC. You've got financial records remain relatively private, and you've got more capital can be raised through the sales of your shares. So quite often, if you ever watch Dragon's Den, you are looking at people investing and having shares of 5%, etc. There, do you have any companies that will want to get investment into the company, and they will offer shares, a percentage share. Disadvantages, though, it's more complex to set up due to legal requirements. You lose some control as shareholders have voting rights, so that they can maybe outvote you to if you want to take the company in a certain direction, and you're unable to sell shares to the public. Public limited companies, though, you've got advantages. Again, limited liability. You've got separate legal identity. You are perceived to have a certain status when you're a PLC within the media. You've got more capital and can raise through the sales of shares on the stock exchange as well. Now, disadvantages, so you've got lack of privacy, as financial performance is available for all to view, and you've got more complex to set up due to increased legal requirements and ongoing administration costs. You lose some control. Shareholders again have voting rights, and you have got a risk of hostile takeovers for your business. The factors affecting the choice of your legal structure is the ability and need to maybe raise your finance and the nature of business. So like professions such as accountants or dentists are often partnerships. Now, personal preference, whether you want to be totally independent, support from partners, or willingness to share your equity, it will depend on what you prefer to do. Whether you want limited or unlimited liability with that, the size of the business is going to affect the legal structure as well. We look at non-profit organisations, so not all businesses have an objective of profit, and businesses have an objective to do good maybe for society, and any surplus made is then ploughed back into achieving that goal. So this could be a social enterprise, or it could be charities. Now, Business Link states that a social enterprise is a business with primarily social objectives whose surplus are principally invested for that purpose in the business or in the community, rather than being driven by the need to maximise profit for shareholders and owners. So you're looking at the community. Now, not-profit organisations, so charities are organisations which aim to support a specific cause or benefit the well-being of society. Now, charities may support groups of society, maybe animals, places, conserving buildings, maybe like National Trust, areas hit by natural disasters. So if there's been a massive earthquake or a hurricane that's basically destroyed a community, charities are set up to maybe help with that, bring aid, and also like research into curing disease, so like heart disease, cancer. Organisations have to be registered to gain charitable status and are treated differently by the government in terms of taxes. So not-profit organisation with societies, these are organisations, formal or informal, made up of groups of people with a common interest. So societies may be groups of religious groups, maybe hobby-based, like rowing society at university, for example. You've got cultural, and you've got maybe political societies as well. Cooperatives are slightly different, and these are organisations that operate for the well-being of their members. And members can be customers, they can be employees, and they can also be suppliers and producers. We'll have a little look at business location now. So factors influencing startup location decisions. So several factors that will affect where this new business chooses to locate. And these are things like cost, your infrastructure, the market, technology, qualitative factors. Costs, small business faces a number of costs that it will try to reduce, and costs will include costs of buying or renting premises as well as a business rates. And costs will vary depending on whether the location is a town or city or village, urban or rural, central or on the outskirts, prestigious or deprived areas. So you need to decide what is obviously going to be the best. There is no point if your business doesn't necessarily need passing foot trade, you might be better off setting up outside of a town or city rather than paying like big rates within a town or city. You also need to think about, what your target. They want where they most like to see your setup. If you are wanting to get customers into the actual store itself, obviously it will depend on where you think is going to be best for your customer base. A new business will also have to consider its target market again, and labour costs can be a significant drain of business resources, and these will also vary depending upon location. The cost can be reduced if there's a good infrastructure, markets are nearby, and there's good pool of skilled workers. For example, university towns provide an educated workforce, so it makes sense for a small business maybe to locate in those sorts of areas. You also have to think about your infrastructure. So transport links, roads, railways, airports, what are you needing around you for your business to function? So it also includes communication links and local services, street lights, refuse collection. If we think about communication, if you've got a business that really does depend on online sort of marketing, e-commerce online, then you need to be thinking about, is the broadband going to be sufficient? Do we have fibre broadband? Are we able to use video conferencing, because that's what we really are going to need to use, and you're going to need to consider that. So setting up business in the middle of Snowdonia, for example, probably isn't going to be the best idea, because your communication links isn't going to be the best within that particular area. So you're going to need to think about those factors. Small businesses will need to access to the above in order to provide their goods or services. And if customers find it difficult to access a firm, they're going to go elsewhere. So, it's really important that you are thinking about how customers can access you. The significance of infrastructure will depend obviously on the nature of the business. So you might not need to be near good transport links, for example. And if that is not a concern for your business, then you don't need to take that into consideration. You might not need good communication links to run your business, and if that's the case, you don't need to necessarily think about that and take that into consideration. So it all depends on what your business is needing. So businesses that do not rely on like face-to-face contact, for example, might be able to set up anywhere, even a remote location that might be quite cheap. On the other hand, a retailer needs access to customers in order to succeed. So being in a town or city, a busy town or city is going to really help with that. A business selling goods around the country or even abroad will need good distribution networks. So being close to maybe an airport or being close to somewhere where you've got good logistics, near good transport links is going to be important. So the market is where buyers and sellers come together to exchange goods and services. Now, the significance of the market and the firm's location decisions will depend upon the nature of the business. Again, many services sector businesses, much to me, in an area where there is a large footfall. So like Wetherspoons, for example, started off as a small business located near a tube and train stations in London, and they've grown into a massive big chain. Restaurants, salons, newsagents need to be in areas where the customers are. And if small businesses is a supplier to large firms, it will be as close to that business maybe as possible. And if a product is bulk gaining, it's physically bigger due to the production process, it'll be close to market to reduce distribution costs. Shopping goods, so ones where the consumer does not rush into purchase but compares different options, weighing up the strengths and weaknesses of each option before reaching a decision. A new business may therefore want to be close to other similar businesses. The thing about technology is application of what has been learned through science, and this includes forms of communication, information provision through such mediums as personal computer, internet, fax, and mobile phones. Now, new technologies allow small businesses to communicate from home, gathering, processing, and sending information through, for example, the internet. Now, teleworking means that small business can work from home with instant communication methods. New businesses might choose a virtual location when buyers and sellers meet to trade in a virtual marketplace, so on the internet, like Facebook Marketplace or eBay, Amazon, etc. Qualitative factors. So these are factors based on personal desires and needs of the owner. So they're important for the small business, but their significance will depend upon the owner of the business. Now, the quality of life and lifestyle of the owner is likely to be fundamental to the location decision. Small businesses might find it easier to find cheaper premises in other areas, but will these areas provide the same standard of living for the owner? So that needs to be obviously considered. Attractiveness, crime levels, school standards, family and friends all play an important role in location for a small business as well because of this. Now, often it's difficult to separate the owner's business and personal life, and a large firm might relocate, but the impact on location for a small business is far greater in personal terms. So just stop there. Thank you for watching that presentation, and what we'll be looking at next time is we're going to look at whether or not for our live session I'll summarize everything that we've just been going on the last 3 sessions, but also I'll try and get some exam questions as well and pop those in there also. I will see you in a couple of weeks' time.